Kareem Rae, your host for the One Soccer Nation panel discussion today. It's our second panel. Super excited to do it. The topic of discussion is finding a home in the United States to launch a pro club. We have great people on with us today who are within different spaces within the beautiful game that bring us all together. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time today. And for a quick intro, we'll start with Steven, and then we'll get everyone on.
Thanks, Kareem. Stephen Short, formerly of Lexington Sporting Club in the USL, launched Lexington after spending about 13 years at USL, leading expansion efforts and expansion club strategy. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
I'm Mark McCullers. I'm the president and founder of McCullers Group. We are a sports real estate advisory firm working on a lot of USL stadium projects across the country. Started out in facility management, came to Columbus, Ohio to build the original Crew Stadium, working with Lamar Hunt for 15 years, 10 as president and general manager of the club until the Hunt family sold the team, and saw the opportunity very intentionally with the growth of the USL and soccer in the country and the need for more infrastructure, stadiums, training facilities. So that's our company's primary focus.
I'm Doug Erwin, Vice Chairman and Chief Brand Officer of Greenville Triumph and Greenville Liberty Soccer Clubs. We are entering season 6 as a USL League One franchise with the Triumph, and entering our 3rd season with the Liberty in the USLW League. I oversee all of our marketing, communications, branding, merchandise, and I'm part of the ownership group that worked originally with Stephen, actually, to bring professional soccer to upstate South Carolina, and work with Mark McCullers and the McCullers Group as well on trying to secure a permanent stadium for our clubs.
Hi. My name is Chris Keeney. I am a contractor for my own company called A3 Sports Consulting, and as well as United Sports Property. My background is working within Major League Soccer for many, many years since the league's inception. I've also worked with USL. I've owned a team here in Tucson, Arizona, which was a USL 2 team at the time, and had an opportunity for a while to be pro, and is back to USL 2. So I think I can speak to some of the strengths and weaknesses of opportunity there within this league and within soccer and space in the United States. And I'm very pleased to say that all of these people on this Zoom are friends of mine through various capacities, although I worked for Fred Matthes and for Mark McCullers, so I may use the word sir a lot when I address them.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Fred Matthes. I'm currently the GM of the Annapolis Blues FC in the NPSL, one of the lower division clubs in this country. I also run my own consulting company, FM Pro Soccer, very generic term, but that's basically what I've done over the last 30 years, is worked in pro soccer in various capacities, mostly in the fan base building and ticketing operations side of things, starting out in MLS when it very first began back in the mid-90s, for about 20 years with DC United. After that, working with Sacramento Republic out west, and then consulting to some of the larger clubs around, like New Mexico United, and helped to start a club in Fresno that has since moved over to Monterey, and then worked with several other NPSL clubs around the area. And as Chris said, I've known most of the guys on this call for quite a while, other than Doug and Kareem, and you guys are new to the club here. We're the old guys in the room, and now you guys are going to be part of this soon.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So really appreciate that, Fred. So again, I'm definitely the new guy in the room, and I'm very appreciative of everyone, and definitely learning a lot. I just want to touch back in regards to what I was saying. A lot of the learnings I've been learning and research in regards to the investment opportunity in the U.S. landscape for soccer specifically has been a lot. And there's not, from my perspective, a lot of public information in regards to how to navigate this opportunity. It's an exciting time where soccer is in the U.S. with Copa America coming up in June, the 2026 Men's World Cup, and then maybe a Women's FIFA World Cup in the US. So with saying that, my intention and goal for this panel is to really give a perspective to investors in regards to how to navigate the space. So, Stephen, I'll start with you in regards to, is a lot of the opportunity based off the network and who you know in regards to how to get inside of these investment opportunities? Or is there a place where investors can go directly to navigate the opportunity to invest?
Let me take myself off mute after 4 years of Zooms. It's a great question. I think it really varies, to be honest with you, Kareem. I mean, in our experience, and Chris can tell you this, because when we worked together on expansion, I think he was a regional guy for us at USL for a while. You would have people that would reach out to you, just straight cold call you, somehow get your contact information or hear of other discussions that were going on in the market. And that's when you could kind of start to pick up that people were talking, but maybe didn't qualify for whatever box they didn't check according to US Soccer or the leagues at the time. Or people maybe say, hey, I want to invest in this existing team. How do I do it? Those are always interesting because really the leagues would defer that to the team, right? Like if it's someone, say here in Tampa, if they wanted to buy part of the Tampa Bay Rowdies, the league doesn't control that in USL. MLS, that's a different beast, but you would basically direct them to the team, and it's a discussion there. I wouldn't say that happens very often, that teams are open up to parsing out part of the shares, so to speak. Some would come through your network, some would come through someone in soccer, or sometimes it's as simple as an online form, right? They just want to know, very similar to what we're talking about now. And it was the league's responsibility to basically respond. And so at that point, we spent a lot of time detailing, like, how do we put it in marketing materials? How do you display it online? How do you make sure that people truly understand that process of, one, acquiring your own team, or how do you become part of a bigger entity? That shifted when some teams went crowdfunding, went through that model. Chattanooga was a good example. Seattle 2 at that time had a small share that they opened up for some, we'll call it public ownership, maybe, to the foundation, but you don't see it that often. And usually, and that took steam. Chattanooga was phenomenal what they did. And Chattanooga FC. Let me clarify, because there are 2 teams in Chattanooga. But I think it varies, right? So Chris and Fred, both at DC United, they have an extensive network. Mark's network. A lot of times you're at conferences, you have buddies, and they find out and they say, hey, or, we know somebody that's interested, can I put them in touch with you? So really, there's no right, there's no wrong. We would just try to find the easiest way to explain to people and to walk them through that process of, oh, great, let's have a 10, 15-minute talk. We'll walk you through it. If it's something you want to continue pursuing, if it's an option, then let's talk about it.
Absolutely.
Pretty interested in, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be the moderator here, but Doug, you guys have been through this somewhat recently. I mean, how did you come across the opportunity and pursue it?
Yeah, I think it kind of fell into our lap, and Stephen was, kind of our first touch point. Stephen, you'll have to correct me if I'm misremembering any of this, but I believe the league had some discussions with our Chamber of Commerce in town and some of the business leaders, about interest in the Greenville market. And we heard about it, I think, through the president of our Chamber of Commerce, who is good friends with my dad, and that got back to us, and it was something that we were interested in. And until that point, it never really occurred to my dad or myself, to own and operate a professional sports franchise. We had done some work in and around professional sports, mainly with the minor league baseball team in town on the advertising and marketing front. So we felt like we knew a little bit, but certainly not operations. So it was an interesting process to come to that after there had already been some discussions about the market, which really helped us because we knew, Stephen had said that Greenville was near the top of their list for what would become League One. In terms of market size and the attraction to the market, given how dynamic it is. So, we felt good about coming into a situation where we already knew, well, the league is definitely interested. They're just looking for the right person, as opposed to some people that, Stephen, I'm sure, would come to you guys in less than ideal markets looking the team that you maybe didn't feel as good about as Greenville or some others.
Or less than ideal ownership.
That was Kareem. Go ahead, Chris. What was it?
I was just say, or less than ideal ownership groups. The market could be spectacular, but
yeah, and we can get it. That's a whole different campfire story, right? Of good markets and ownership groups. But Doug's pretty much on the nail on the head. The weird connection that we had to Greenville, I'll share with you. An athletic director that I worked with at the University of Tennessee named Mike Hamilton knew Doug's father through his ad agency, and I had visited Greenville. We had a meeting set up by Carlos Phillips of the Chamber, and Carlos, huge fan of this guy. He is amazing. And we basically just went in and said, we're interested in the city. The first meeting with Carlos was a little intimidating. He played football at Kentucky, and I'll never forget when he told me, Doug, I said, how's your day going? He said, good, don't mess it up. And that's a great way to start a meeting, right? So you're like, oh man, pressure. And we had a meeting with local business leaders organized by Carlos, the influencers and leaders in the market. And some were able to make it, some weren't. So we spent a couple of days in market meeting with leaders, and then we started having conversations with Doug and his family, and it just felt right, at the league. And we were progressing, and I'd always thought it was fun. And Doug, I don't know if I ever shared this with you. We'd have our calls, and your dad get real excited, but he'd back himself down. And so it was like floor, it been heavy on the brake. I'm like, I could never get a read on it. I'm like, what's going to happen here?
It's a lot of money, Stephen,
Yeah. No, dude, I get it, right? And I just love the conversations because every time we had those, they were exciting for us at the league, thinking, we think we have the right family, the right people behind this that really are looking for this project to continue to contribute to the city. And we did. And so it's just one of those stories of it comes together. And then when you talk in the market and everybody said, oh, the Erwin's behind it, it'll be good. Like the name is synonymous with quality and care in the market. And Doug, to you and your family, it's just a testament for what you've done there. And that's what we look for, right? So people know that the ownership group behind it, going back to Chris's comment, will take care of it. It's not a fly-by-night operation. It has an air of quality to it. And like you said, there are some cities that are great and performance wasn't met. But, that happens in every league and every business in the world. So, but no, it was a fun process.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's key is that if you find the right market and you do the right things once you get there, then that club's going to be successful. There's plenty of markets, as we all know in soccer, that have come and gone. Everybody thought that's a no-brainer. That one should have been a hit, but something didn't happen. Somewhere along the way, there weren't the right people in place. You didn't have excitement in the market. You had too much competition in the market from other pro sports, other leagues, other things going on, other activities to go to. You look at Miami right now. How many years did Miami just struggle to get a team pulled together, to put butts in the seats, as we say, to put crowds together, and that one big name comes to town, all of a sudden it's the biggest thing around, all over the country, and that with Messi coming in. Not that you can put Messi in every single market, but you can certainly build around the successes that are there once you have all your other pieces in place, the business structure of it. In terms of finding those investors, as we always used to say, the busiest meetings at MLS meetings or at other league meetings, and that was always the hotel lobby. I mean, that's where you're going to meet a lot of the folks in that are around the game, that are excited about the game. I remember some of the earlier years in MLS when you had great ownership like Phil Anschutz and Robert Kraft and Lamar Hunt as as Mark mentioned in that. And all of a sudden their friends start showing up to the meetings, and you're getting introduced to somebody from somewhere else, and they want to pick your brain, as they say, about this certain market or that certain market. They had the money. Good money is going to find good opportunities. And these other friends of theirs started all of a sudden pop up and pick up ownership in different markets around the country. I think the only market that I can think of that didn't do it without a big, powerful owner in place first was Philadelphia. Philadelphia felt like they were owed a team because there were a team in New York, there was a team down in DC where we were. Their fan group got together that was a supporter of the American Outlaws, supporter of the U.S. men's national team. They decided we want a team. They basically lobbied MLS, put numbers together. They showed up at MLS Cup that we were hosting. Chris, I don't remember if you were there that year, but the Sons of Ben showed up with about 350 people, took over some prime real estate in terms of seating, and wore their light blue jerseys right in the middle of the crowd. And sure enough, within a year, they were talking to MLS offices, and they had a franchise about 2 years later. Not that you can do it the same way as MLS does, but it's sort of those opportunities. Like I said, good money is going to find good opportunities. If we can build something within marketplaces where there isn't a lot of other pro sports and that, and pro soccer has a way to get themselves in there, and we build the right team around it, then the money will show up. The money will find that opportunity and get behind it on. I think it's not as easy as that. There's certainly a lot of work that has to be done before then. But I think those are the criteria you have to put in place: is find a good market, get good people like the Erwins down in the Greenville area and that are behind a project, get good people that have been around the game that can help to sell that story or that project, and then let the money come in from there.
Yeah, I think just put even a finer point on it. There's a direct correlation between engaged local ownership and team success.
Yeah.
So it's a formula, and you see it in New Mexico United with Pete there, and other markets. So, you know, a lot of times we're going into a market on behalf of the league where there is no ownership, but we're engaging with economic development officials, sports commissions, city managers, because the league wants us to answer the question, where are we going to play and how much is it going to cost? Because that's the first question the investor is going to ask, right, Stephen? And so we try to answer that question. But in that process, then, you know, there's local stakeholders that can be engaged in that process, and they're, you know, potential owners. And a lot of times, you know, to Fred's point, there's strong local soccer community or youth soccer club or USL 2 club. And we work with those folks to try to acquire additional investors, you know, to round out the capital stack for whatever needs to be done, facilities, franchise costs, operating startup costs, things of that nature. So a lot of networking, I would say.
A lot of networking. You're right. Sometimes we used to joke it was Josh Keller and I on the road a lot for League One. I think we spent more time in minor league baseball stadiums and bars, like in breweries, because that's where our fans were, or then the facilities were. And it was, but you nailed a point. I mean, the cities, the communities that you want to grow in, the toughest part sometimes is the investor, because everything can be great in paper. You can have a great soccer community, and then you are literally just peeling back layers of the onion to find who the right people. And if you can't find them, you know, sometimes it's a timing game too. Is it the right time? Or how many times, I mean, Chris, have we heard, well, maybe not year one, maybe year two, and they want to see it up and running because the first question outside of how much is who else is in, and because they want to know the markets, they want to know the other groups. And so we started hearing that so much. All right, let's get the initial near final group together in a meeting. We did it at in Atlanta at the MLS All-Star game, and we said, look around, no phones. Like, this is most likely the group. And I think there were 2 or 3 that peeled out, and another 1 or 2 that came in after that. But for the most part, that was the group that ran in year one. And then you start to see that community between the league and the teams start to develop, right? So you mentioned the network of, you know, Greenville, South Georgia, Omaha, Madison, North Texas, Orlando City, Toronto too. They all start coming together, and then they know people, right? So, okay, we need to be in this market, and we'd be upfront for the most part of saying, maybe not as much as we should be at times, right, Doug? here are the other cities we're looking at, because then the job is the league's up and running. Now, how do we start to grow in phase two, but also do it in a way that isn't financially detrimental to the existing clubs that are already in the league? So that really becomes that fine massaging that Mark refers to, and other elements that are out there. Because if you look at the early years of USL, when there was one team on the West Coast, which is what is now championship, right? It was now what is now Orange County. And, that team had a tough go first couple of years because they were bearing so much travel. But yet, on the growth side, we're up front. You'd be up front about it. Like, here's the deal: if you want to put one out there, we're going to look at the economics that it impacts the rest of the teams with, and then how that impacts you as a club, and how do you find your path to sustainability, whether it's 3, 5, 10 years, and grow from there. So the path is different for every club.
Stephen, one of my favorite.
Stephen, sorry, Kareem, I kind of want to ask a follow-up question. Maybe this is something we're going to go into, but I'm curious to hear everybody else on this. We just talked about, and Stephen and Mark, you both kind of mentioned it. Local ownership. It's not always possible.
Right.
The success rate of out-of-town ownership is probably a little lower for some of the reasons we just talked about. But for everybody on the panel, like, when you guys have seen it work somewhere, how are they able to overcome not being in market as much? Is it boots on the ground at the senior management leader or level of the club, or what are some of the things that go into? Because I know that not every market are you going to have a primary investor that can either get to the capital stack on their own, or that has the desire to be in market all the time.
I mean, I can step up and answer that you definitely have to have people that are there in the marketplace that have some pull, whether they're part of city councils, part of just the business structure that's there, the Chamber of Commerce, as you mentioned before, Doug. And I can point to Sacramento particularly. There's a gentleman, Warren Smith, who I know, Stephen, you probably worked with him a couple of times in different markets, and that now he's been exploring some new markets to get into. Warren was the mover and shaker in Sacramento. He had grown up around there, or not around there, but I mean, he had lived there for a long time. He knew everybody. He knew the politicians. He knew the chamber, the business community. He knew everybody that was there. He was the one who strung a lot of the money together, but he was the builder. He was the one who put the people in place that knew the sport, that knew how to get to the other people in Sacramento who would buy the tickets, who would buy the sponsorships, and that too. The money was around there already because Sacramento is not that far from the Bay Area. It had some Silicon Valley money that had worked its way up that way, where people had retired up that way or that bought property up that way. He was able to find that money as well to pull it all together. But it was really that local sort of drive and passion, because you had to have a drive for the sport of soccer, but also the marketplace. Sacramento has a little bit of a chip on its shoulder, as we used to always say out there, and that it wasn't the Bay Area, it wasn't LA, it was California, it was the capital of the state, but it had its own little thing going on. And the only real competition we had was a AAA baseball team and the Sacramento Kings in the NBA. So there was a huge void there. Everybody that wanted to go see NFL football or Major League Baseball had to drive all the way down to the Bay Area. They wanted to stay local to Sacramento. And we knew that story. And that's what we used to tell. And that's what Warren used to tell to everybody he was talking with is, look, this team is about Sacramento. And I have to be a little bit selfish in that I've taken some of those principles in Annapolis, where we are. We're the first soccer team that's ever called itself Annapolis, because all the teams that have ever been, all the soccer teams or lacrosse teams or whatever that have been in Annapolis have always called themselves Maryland or Chesapeake or Bay or something. They didn't identify with the local community. And they didn't do as well, maybe not just for that reason, but we really identified around the city of Annapolis, just as we did out in Sacramento. And people flock to that. They really want to support something that's their own hometown and their own neighbors that they see at the games, and that they're part of that whole community. And that's what we built around. So I think the local aspect is super key to this, and finding the right people that can get that sort of momentum going within a marketplace.
Yeah, I agree with you, Fred. And certainly others, I'd love to hear Mark's comments too, but I think you look at the evolution of a club, it may start local, but may transition to out of market ownership, or may start out as out of market. To me, it's it's an ultimate compliment if someone doesn't live in a city but is funding a professional team in a different city. And there's something about that. And so they are committing to that community for growth and for development for whatever the personal reasons are. But as long as they continue to do it properly and fund the programs, hire the right staff, certainly you need someone in a senior leadership team that's hyper local, usually a local product or knows the game and the business, like Fred was mentioning. Then, you know, as long as they're contributing properly and they're just not letting the team squander away, I think that's fine. Who wouldn't want that? Now, you need to be present periodically, right? Look, half the Premier League's owned by Americans now, and how many games they make it to. I guarantee you there are a handful of games every year.
Yes.
Commitment, right? So you look at that, and it's like, it's not just absentee ownership. Absentee ownership is the worst thing that could possibly happen. So I think as long as there's presence and they've made sure that the front office is strong, it's representative, and it's able to be nimble in the market as needed to, yeah, out of market ownership, you're going to start seeing more and more of it. It's inevitable. At least maybe even at minority shares, maybe not always majority, but you're going to start seeing a lot more of out of market ownership, I believe.
Yeah, I would echo that having someone local that is passionate. And for the MLS clubs that I worked for, you know, say Mark McCullers, who was passionate, we didn't have local ownership, did we? We had Lamar, who passed away not long after I got hired, and then it was his sons and Clark, and they were out of market. So you and I and the whole club had to be the face of the club, because we may not have had those high rolling relationships to start off with. We had to act as if we did, come under the auspice of the Hunt name, and ask people to invest in us, whether through tickets or sponsorship or whatever. The care and engage. And it's, if you have an ownership group that even if they're out of market, but they get that and then they hire well, then that will permeate. But you definitely want to have people that press flesh in that market and show up to all the events and other people's and going to the chamber meetings and doing everything they can to be engaging, because that's what we're selling, is an engagement, it's a connection. And that connection then happens on Saturdays, usually at a stadium, which we should probably talk about. Stadium be the next big thing we got to have, right, Mark? So but you got to have that and start by going into the community with a vigor.
I think having local minority owners, so you know, there's requirements that are come from U.S. Soccer Federation in terms of you know, how much a majority owner needs to own and whatnot. But there's certainly plenty of opportunity for local investors that have those roots in the community, that you know, have those relationships that can be leveraged, and it's critically important. I think we're going to close a deal hopefully today with an international investor coming into a U.S. market. Well, the local youth club owns the rights. So we, you know, negotiated an equity share for them going forward so that they are still always present and the relationships they have, you know, don't become obsolete. But it's an international investor. So, you know, they're going to be somewhat absent, but you have to account for that.
Was that done through an EB5?
No, this particular one was not an EB5.
Got it. Are you able to share what it was done through? What program?
It was a straight out. They're establishing an entity here in the U.S. to govern their U.S. interests, and it'll be under that umbrella. So it was private capital. Got it.
Okay, so we'll dive into the stadium opportunity. I just want to make a comment quick. Stephen, one of my favorite stories from you was, you know, going into bars, speaking to fans in suits and saying, "Hey, don't be scared of us. Let's have a chat." That was one of my favorite stories on our podcast.
I appreciate that. It started back at the coaches convention years ago.
Yeah.
You know, the 10,000 soccer coaches show up in a suit and they're all wondering, who are you and what are you doing there?
They're all
You got,
they're all wearing sambas and tracksuits, and you're
yeah, it's
walking in.
tracksuit convention, right? You can hear it a mile away by the old whisking noises. But the yeah, you gotta know who your fans are. You gotta know who you're talking to. I mean, that's the key to anything we're doing. We're talking about engagement. So suits and ties really aren't appropriate in some places, right? It scares people.
For sure. One of my favorite stories. With saying that, I've listened to a lot of, or a good bit of Justin Papadakis interviews in regards to I'm quite biased in regards to leagues to USL. Darren Matthes was really mentioning that there's no other league in the world that has both men's and women's under the same umbrella, which is amazing. So with saying that, Justin really, in a lot of interviews I listened to him, he really mentions the mixed use development opportunity, the real estate opportunity in the US. There is no, from my understanding and research, there's no opportunity like that in the UK. You cannot go and invest and start up a club in the UK. You got to invest into an existing club. Vice versa, versus the opportunity in North America or the US specifically, there's land opportunity to go in, find a market that's at least open, and plant that flag and build out that infrastructure. So Mark, you guys work very closely with USL in regards to that stadium opportunity. That's really the home that brings in the community and fans. Could you just share a little bit in regards to, are you guys working only with USL, and then just paint a picture of exactly what you guys provide for the league in regards to, speak as if you were speaking to an investor internationally that's coming from the outside that wants to get in, as you mentioned, a deal that you're working on that hopefully gets closed today, in that respect.
Yeah. So, on behalf of the league, we're really focused on initial pre-development phase. So feasibility, and every market is different. In some markets, they've got a site already there, and it's a preferred site and it's a good site. Maybe it's under control, maybe it's not, but that's where we start. And then we really move towards a public-private partnership. I say often that there's reasons private developers are not building these stadiums all across the country. They don't pencil, and they frankly need public-private partnership, public development incentives. So we work with tax increment financing a lot, hospitality taxes, other sources that are appropriate sources to help get these stadiums constructed. So pulling that whole deal together is our first primary objective, and importantly, negotiating the license or the operating agreement. And ideally, we want the team to control, manage, and operate that stadium. It's critically important, and so that's a key negotiating point for us in getting the foundation set. And I often also always say that we need a responsible funding solution for the stadium, but we need a lease that is going to provide for the long-term sustainability of the team. You can't have a lease that's going to put your team under financial pressure right away. It's not going to work. And so that's really our first focus, Kareem, whether we're working on behalf of USL or anybody else for that matter, whether it's an existing owner or a prospective owner that's trying to establish a franchise and needs the stadium. We're figuring out what that feasibility is and trying to get that deal put together. Then we move into construction management and actual delivery of the facility, and then, consulting on the back end, what we call optimization, of operations and efficiencies and revenue optimization and things of that nature. So that's our space right there.
Got it. And Doug, when I spoke to you not only you, but a few other club owners that don't own their stadium, that's when it comes, there seems to be a lot of friction in regards to not the primary tenant, or not being able to sell booze, whatever the case may be, to fans. And Doug, I think there's a transition period where you guys are in working with Mark, and if you could speak a little bit about that and why that is such a, correct me if I'm right or wrong, but a primary focus for you guys to take the next step and to get to that next level for your club?
Yeah, I mean, Kareem, the most black and white version is it's a huge financial challenge, and Mark just spoke to it. You know, it's owning and operating and having a lease agreement that puts you in, even if not an advantageous situation, a situation that is not a detriment. But you know, you look and we cite this all the time because it's just down the road, but I think it's cited correctly in lots of stadium discussions is the Atlanta Braves model, because of what they've been able to do, getting revenue from the non-baseball side of things and how it's transformed their business. You know, the Braves are an organization that's run by a business, Liberty Media, that they are a line item, and they don't have whimsical spending. And I can tell you that not many owners at the D3 U.S. soccer level have whimsical spending habits either. So, you know, the stadium component is huge to be able to get those ancillary revenues, concessions, parking, you know, being some of the main ones outside of tickets and sponsorship to be able to make your club successful. And the other challenge is, I mean, the trickle down effect goes to every area of your business. You know, I think of, as I look at the TV schedule that has just come out for League One this year, of which games are going to be on Golazo and which are going to get on, you know, TV. And we prided ourselves in being the first League One match on linear TV when we were on, or on cable TV when we faced Omaha and hosted Omaha in 2020. You know, we don't have a home game on the schedule this year, and I'm sure anybody at the league office would be happy to tell me it's because we don't have a great home venue for TV with football lines on the field. I don't take offense to it. It's the situation we're in. So you look at the missed opportunities that come from that. Those aren't hard revenue things from a ticket sales standpoint or parking standpoint, but from an exposure standpoint, from being able to sell merchandise online because somebody in Oregon, you know, flips on ESPN2 and sees your game. I think it's so wide ranging, but you know, I'm sure Mark and Stephen too have probably heard us say this. You know, we're not developers. Our family's not developers. We wish we were now that we knew, you know, what line we're in. But you look at, you know, you look at some of the clubs in our league that are really able to come in with a development, be it Northern Colorado that's coming in with a whole youth soccer complex, or the Chattanooga Red Wolves that have come in and are building a complex. Darren down in Statesboro, to be able to do that just gets you such a leg up from the start. And you know, it's frankly, it's not a sustainable path long term to be in a stadium that you don't have revenue control, you don't have date control, which affects your revenue. That's something people don't think about. You've got to look at what are the other tenants in your stadium and what days are they going to block off. You would think, you know, we're in a college football stadium, so that's not that much of an inconvenience. Well, yes, you know, they've got practice in the spring for a month and a half. They've got lacrosse that plays in there in the summer. When you think, well, it's college stadium, summer's not going to have, you know, as many conflicts. Well, there are camps. I mean, Stephen lived this in Lexington. I'm sure. You know, it's not the 6 to 7 home football games that many fans think, oh, that's only 6-7 days a year. You know, there are a lot of teams in our league that share stadiums with high school football or high school soccer. So it's a huge factor in every facet of the business, and all of it pretty much trickles back to your ability to make money and generate revenue, and that's how you stay afloat. So you know, the sooner you can come in with a stadium situation, the better you're going to set yourself up from the start. And you know what we've seen, and Stephen dealt with on the expansion side, certainly is COVID slowed that down, and the after effect of that, and getting local government. Mark, you know, I'm sure you can speak to this. The appetite for local governments to spend money as part of a public-private partnership, they're still coming back around to pre-COVID levels of doing that. And so here we are, you know, 4 years after the heart of the COVID pandemic, and
Yeah, I think I might have lost Doug.
a lot of cities and a lot of organizations.
Sorry, I thought I lost Doug. I think one thing to add to that, with owning your own stadium or having management control of it, you're not just focused on your 20 dates a year, which is a beautiful thing. Then you start working on what other events can you host in your stadium from, are you close to a convention center? Can you can you have hospitality offerings? Can you lease your stadium out for high school football, rugby, World Cup base camps, whatever you can think of that could fit inside that facility? So now you're turning that asset too. So then you're starting to tap into potential sports tourism funding. You're tapping into local civic funding. It just depends on how you program the venue. Mark spends a ton of time on this. And so I think as you look at controlling that facility, you're looking at economic impact from direct jobs, indirect jobs, travel spending. If you look at Lexington, built a soccer complex, you're seeing that around the country. But to look at what the Braves did, you're now a landlord, and then you run a Major League Baseball team, which now it changes. And the Rays are looking to do something similar in Tampa with that development. I'm sure they're studying Atlanta closely. The Tampa Bay Sun of the USL Super League has worked with Hillsborough County, which is the local school district here in Tampa, to redevelop Blake High School's field into what will be their stadium, so that they'll be going through a lot of that scheduling practice as well. Matter of fact, they ripped the field out. I drove past it yesterday. So now it's just a big piece of dirt next to the river, so that'll be fun to see. And you're looking for ways for the club to maximize venue opportunities for revenue generation. And that leads to jobs and local spending too. And Mark doesn't certainly spend the most time in that, but if you can get control of that stadium, a lot of times the cities don't want to manage them because they may not have the funding to do that anyway. So you can relieve their workload as well.
Yeah.
Mark, let me tee this up for you. Oh, go ahead, Fred.
I was going to say, one of the other key things too is the authenticity of the sport. Mark, you and Chris both worked in the very first professional soccer stadium. I know there were other ones, but really the first at the top level professional soccer specific stadium. It says a lot about where the sport is and how it's grown. In the early days of MLS, you only had Crew Stadium in '99, I think it was, it came about. We were playing in 50,000, 60,000 seat football stadiums, American football stadiums before that. The lines were still there. The sight lines weren't very good. Camera angles weren't very good, all of that. Once you build your own soccer specific stadium, you just bring that overall authenticity to it. And I love seeing now what's happening around the country at this next level with USL, with what Omaha has been doing, what Providence is doing, the women's side of it with Kansas City Current, building that team or that stadium out too. I think that just lends so much to it. And Doug, you hit it on the broadcasting side of it. People are less inclined to watch something that they can't figure out flipping through the dials. What the heck is this? Is this a baseball game? I see a baseball cutout, but no, they're playing on the other end. They're playing in the, is this a soccer game? What is this? Same with a football game, American football lines on a field. Yeah, you can follow the game, but it's so distracting with painted end lines and end zones and everything else along the way and all that. So that soccer specific stadium just lends itself back to the roots of the sport in Europe or in South America, where people that are true aficionados of the game like to watch a game that looks like a soccer game. And I think that's a key role in where USL is now, taking that next step forward to start building its own stadiums out just for soccer. You can certainly do the other events and things in there, putting the concerts and all that, but for a soccer game, it's built for that.
Well, I would tell you, I think everyone would like to avoid conversion costs of stadiums.
Right.
You're right.
Painting lines and inserting sod or retractable pitcher mounds. Those are big for that. A couple of years of that movement. Doug, you went through it at Furman, right? When you were playing football, you guys painted lines on the football Furman field. Is that correct?
Yeah, and if we get rain in the lead up, that messes things up because they don't want the lines down longer than they have to be, and they've got to take out lacrosse lines too. It's it's a lot, and it changes week to week, and it's just one of the many things. Steve and I remember during COVID when Madison had to go play in a stadium because they weren't allowed to play in that county. They had to go play in Milwaukee, where I think there were 4 or 5 sports worth of lines on the field, but it was the only choice they had.
Yeah, and I think people would be amazed just the pure cost of painting a field. not even turf replacement, but we're talking just painting lines with the machine and scrubbing afterwards. The cost of the paint, the machinery itself is a massive capital investment. Now, if I'm Spokane, I'm buying that outright because I'm going to put so much in there, and just put that into the capital stack. I'll put that on Mark's plate. But it was something where, in Lexington, when we worked at Georgetown College, they were phenomenal to work with. But we were kind of up against the beginning of the season. So we were doing a 6-week turf replacement 7 weeks before the season started. And I don't recommend you ever doing that, but we got through it. But every time we turned, there was a different anomaly that popped up. Field goal posts, right? Doug and I had many calls about the difference of field goal posts at Furman versus Georgetown College, or the perimeter around the field. And so I think as you look at those facilities, understand that you're not going to know everything about the facility you're leasing until you build your own. But it certainly lends a lot of findings to when you do get to build your own, what you want that to look like. And as Fred mentioned, how can you make that the most fan-friendly, authentic environment you can?
One of the things that we got to remember, we got to shout out to Lamar Hunt and family, is that the Columbus Crew Stadium was forced upon them. I don't think they were anxious to build their own stadium, because they were the hope was to play it at the Buckeye Stadium, and it didn't pan out. It didn't work. And so really it was a scramble to get that thing built. So that's evolution one that starts to show the Major League Soccer ownership of the potential, even though it came under threat even. There was another evolution when I was there. They had the notion to take out the seats at one end of the stadium to put in a stage, which then allowed the Hunt organization to begin to host Rock on the Range and concerts and festivals and it also made for our crew environment. It actually improved it, because we were able to consolidate the fan bases into one corner, force them into a unified experience. And we got to leverage the stage. I put on a Christian concert because the stage existed for fellowship night. So that was something that, Mark, I didn't think about it this way, but if they're not forced to do that, are we still playing in football stadiums, or just kind of linked? Probably not, but right, they take longer until the arc was obvious thanks to the Hunts.
I think they did the same thing in Dallas, right?
There's same in Dallas. Yep. Colorado built the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, those stadiums were designed with the stage in mind, but it really had not all that happened, Chris. I don't think the Nordeca would be.
No.
I mean, the Nordeca was forged out of that.
Yeah, that's the supporter base. Yeah.
Chris, let me ask you this, if I can, real quick. You and both Mark were heavily involved in the supporter groups in Columbus and then DC and other teams. Now you're starting to see all these supporter groups come up with their, I won't call them gimmicks, but their traditions, right? Mm-hmm, New England now tosses a box of tea, a created tea, which is I think the newest one. I'm like, okay, I like it. Atlanta nails the spike. Memphis 901 with smashing guitars. How much, especially if it's a new club and you've been on the fan side, how are you engaging with those fan groups that early to understand, like, okay, where do you want to sit? What kind of access do you want to be? What type of celebrations or things are you going to come up with? Because as a ticketing director, an ops guy, a event manager, a liaison of supporter groups, there's so many different plates to spin in order to allow them to kind of have that freedom in that corner. How do you design around that?
It's probably after the second, we're talking about investors being the critical component and local feel, at least in the dollars that have to be there. But the next meetings absolutely are with the supporter potential.
Yeah.
And invite them into the culture, invite them into the conversation, so that you're not trying to control them. You're not trying to tell them how it's going to be and they need to adjust to you, that you're willing to adjust to them. That was a great experience. And, DC United, we had the Screaming Eagles and El Norte and Barra Brava, and then running into the Nordeca. And we had a great story that when the stage was finally built, We had a little disparity between the different organizations, and they didn't communicate very well. And a colleague of mine, Eddie Carvaccio, and we were getting to get feedback that, in this great year, by the way, we're winning. We're on an MLS Cup run, which we did win, by the way. And everything is going great. Yeah, baby. we're on our way. Things are going good. It's midsummer now. We're getting this tension and the supporter groups of this. They've all been stuck together and they're not communicating. But thanks to Mark and thanks to the vision of what the club offered, we invited the supporter culture up to we had a suite area, and we basically at the time was the bank. Remember the suite name, Mark? Right? It's some big bank that if they don't sponsor anymore, they don't get any credit.
Huntington Club.
Huntington Club, right? So we invited them up there. We told the supporters, you're welcome in. We kept the media out because we didn't want our local guy to find out what was really going on, because it was coming from concern and tension that the groups were not synergized. And we brought them together, and Eddie and I spoke to them in our suits, actually, and we said, we hope you care about what we say, but ultimately you don't. So we were able to unveil at the time Siggy Schmid, what came out from behind the curtain, and Frankie Haydick, and who's our local legend, the defensive midfielder, Mark, that was the local guy done well. Went to Indiana, player of the year. Sorry, getting older. Right. But we brought them out, and then those guys said, "Hey." And Guillermo Vera Soloto in Spanish says, guys, it's important. And he explained his experience at the Bombonera in Argentina. And those fans are insane. We don't necessarily want that. But we were able to bring them together. And then that forced that congeniality, because they all started to share each other's phone numbers because the team asked them to. And I think, so back to the whole point. After your investors are multi, right? You've got to have the investors in the city and the commerce and chambers of commerce and people who get it at quote unquote a higher level. I don't even know if higher is the right word, but a certain level. But then the investors within the soccer community, the adult leagues, the youth leagues, knowing that they may have their own disparities and displeasures for one another, and saying, we're all welcome here. Let's bond to this notion. Let's sell this thing so that we have something lasting, so that this town will always have a team and a situation and a Saturday that's built for you. And that's to, people who are my age now, and to my kids and their kids, so that it's perpetual and lasting.
That's true. Yeah, I'll add too, Chris, that, and Mark, you'll appreciate this one from the early days of RFK Stadium that's still barely standing. Nobody plays there anymore, but the Barra Brava and the Screaming Eagles, as you mentioned, Chris, and later on La Norte, well, they reached out to us in the very beginning. Matt Matthes, who headed the Screaming Eagles, used to be part of the American Outlaws, or Sam's Army back then. He came to me, and we had a nice little, get-together luncheon just to talk about the sport and what we wanted to see it become in DC. And it was all very visionary and what it could be and all that. And one of the things we did is I brought in a seating map as to the way we thought it would be laid out. And I said, Matt, where do you want to sit? Where would you like your group to be? First of all, how big do you think your group can be? And where would you like to sit? And he picked out an area that was over near where the dugouts were for baseball, because he said, that's where the team's going to come out, right? So we want to be right where the team is. So we said, fine, we set them up there. Well, Barra Brava comes along. Oscar Zambrano was the head of them, and he came into our office early on and said, I'm Bolivian. You have 2 Bolivian stars. We're going to bring 1,000 people to the games. I said, okay, Oscar, let's start with 20 tickets. I just met you. I have no idea. Let me give you 20 tickets. You go out and sell them and come back if you need more. He came back that afternoon, bought 20 more. And I said, okay, here's a few more. Let's go 40 more. He comes back again. Sure enough, he had close to 1,000 people for the opening game. But where we ended up locating Barra Brava was on the far side of the field, because back then, Mark, you remember the Houston Astros, I think it was, or maybe it was the Pirates, were talking about a new stadium in their marketplace, and they were using Washington, that didn't have the Nationals yet, as sort of their leverage. Hey, we can move to Washington. They got a stadium that's ready for us. So the DC Sports Commission didn't want us to sell seats that may not even be there. So they said, you can't sell anything in that what would be left field in the baseball stadium because we might be set up for baseball. So don't sell seats over there as midfield seats. Well, then the deal fell apart with whoever it was, Houston or Pittsburgh or something. And all of a sudden it was like, sell seats there, sell seats there. That's going to be on TV, on camera. We're going to need people there. So we put Bada Bravo over there. Well, the Screaming Eagles, who were over on the other side by the dugout, saw them getting midfield coverage, getting their banners out there on TV. They came to us and said, how about if we move over there now? So we took the entire section of, I don't know what the number was, 113 or 114. It's still on their badges, I think, from where they started, and moved them all over to the other side. So now they had 300 or 400 people. Bada Brava had a regular 300, 400, 500, and side by side, they literally fought over midfield. Who was going to be at midfield? We had at one point even had to paint a line down the middle between section 134 and 135 so that they didn't cross over into each other's groups. So they couldn't show that one was bigger than the other. When they put their banners out, we literally had to measure how much away from midfield it had to be. And it was very much like that almost from day one of DC United. These two competing groups, but they were the best of friends when it came to DC United, particularly on the road. They all got together on the road. They all got along. But in the stadium, out in the tailgate areas, they were like fighting with each other all the time. It was an odd dynamic, but it worked.
Made
Right,
a
I
great
think-
show on TV, though.
Yeah, they were on TV.
But you mentioned a great thing, the American Outlaws. I mean, if I'm any investor,
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting there.
Yep.
I mean, it's a built-in Uber soccer community in pretty much every city in the United States that is willing to talk the game, go to watch a U.S. national team match with them, like in their bar, buy them
Yep.
a round of beer, host a focus group, and just say, would you be open to this? I mean, the American Outlaw group in Greenville had 1,000 signatures on a petition before the team was even done.
Yep.
And so, it's not Sons of Ben, but it's a great, I mean, it was awesome.
Yep.
And
And
so they had a lot of say in that, and they were amazing.
And they know how to communicate well to the rest of the community. They were the ones who were on the internet before the internet really wasn't even was a thing, because that was how you found out about soccer, particularly if you were watching games from Europe or South America, whatever. You had to find the stream or the highlights of the stats or whatever online somewhere. And those groups, particularly the American Outlaws groups, or Sam's Army, as we used to call them, were the ones who were doing all that. And they were knitting the soccer community together, the soccer fan community.
A house is just a house until a family moves into it and makes it their own.
Yep.
And that, to me, is what we're talking about.
Exactly.
And family being the key word.
I love that. I think that's the perfect spot to stop at. I know we're up at time and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. This was fun. I hope you guys really enjoyed. And again, I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to be on the One Soccer Nation panel today.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks,
Kareem.
Kareem. Great
being here with great friends.
I think we could do like an 8-hour series on this, to be honest with you.
Yeah.